Do you really need a cage when it comes to filmmaking, videography, or photography? Let's talk about it. Camera cages look cool and definitely add a sense of professionalism in my opinion. But beyond the looks, cages also have a few key pros and cons to them as well. The pros being that they give your camera some form of protection, typically have an Arca Swiss plate built in on the bottom that allows you to mount your camera onto various things like a tripod or a gimbal, and it provides a lot of mounting points to create a solid base for rigging it up. For cameras with a not so secure micro HDMI port, like this R5C that I have here, there's also cages out there that have an additional piece to secure the cable to ensure it doesn't get knocked loose when you're using it. Now, the downsides to having a cage is that they will add a bit of bulk and weight to your camera, and they can potentially make it more uncomfortable to hold for just handheld shooting. Let's go over all these points in detail so you can decide if buying a camera cage is the right choice for the type of work that you do. Now, there's a few different types of cages out there, from universal cages to half cages to full cages. Universal cages, like the Ulanzi Falcam one, has the least rigidity in my opinion, but it has the convenience factor of allowing you to take it off and on your camera with just the push of a button, unlike all the other cages. They provide a lot of mounting points for your accessories, but because it's only attached with one contact point on the bottom, there's a fair amount of flex to the cage, and it's probably not the best idea to load it up with a ton of heavy accessories. On the bottom, you'll have the option to add your favorite quick release adapter so you can still attach your camera to other things like your tripod or a gimbal. The half cages, like the small rig one that I have here on my Canon R5C, are a step up from the universal cages. Because it's camera specific, they usually have multiple contact points and provide a more secure fit to your camera. Half cages typically don't cover the original grip of your camera, so that leaves it free for when you're handheld for video shoots or photo shoots, but it also doesn't protect that area from drops either. On the bottom, half cages will usually have a built-in Arca Swiss plate that's also extended, so you have more contact with whatever accessory you put this on, whether it's a tripod or gimbal. So with this, you won't need to add an additional adapter plate, although you do have the option to if you don't like the Arca Swiss mount. Finally, full cages have everything we mentioned before, but also goes over your original camera grip as well to provide the most surface area for protection and the most mounting options. This is the most secure cage option and will have the least amount of cage flex as it covers your entire camera body and it's secured using the most attachment points. The downside to this one is that it adds the most weight and bulk to your setup, most notably when you pack your camera in your bag or when you're holding it by the grip. Now let's talk about the main features of a cage, the mounting options. This is what my main camera, the Canon R5C, looks like most of the time with a small rig half cage on. But for certain situations, it could also look like this. Cages provide a really solid base to your camera should you find the need to rig it up for certain shots. This could be something as simple as adding on a top handle for a more natural handheld position, or mounting a V-mount battery if you need the extra power for longer shoots. You can also add a monitor onto it for more accurate referencing of your frame, and a boom mic like this if you need to capture audio on the fly. The best thing about cages is that there's always a lot of mounting options on every side of the cage, even on the bottom side here. So if we take off the V-mount that's currently blocking the bottom side of the cage, you can create a bit of a BTS rig using another camera and a magic arm like this over here, where you can capture a first-person kind of view from your camera while you're shooting. Or you can even create popular POV rigs using this magic arm or something else that's mounted to the cage to create clips where you're tracking an object like this. On most cages, you'll find a number of 1/4" threaded holes and 3/8 threaded holes, and sometimes also RE locating pins over here, and rosette mounts, which this cage doesn't have, but it looks something like that. These mounting options are typically the standard for most filmmaking accessories, and the cage pretty much gives you an empty canvas to build the rig that you need for your shoots. I've done commercial video work for a few years now, and I only bought a cage last year when I felt like I truly needed it. Before that, this is how my camera was set up. So this is the same camera without the cage, and these are the same accessories that I used to build a handheld rig without the cage. The only different piece here is this top handle. So this is the one that I used with the cage with a 1/4" mounting bolt and RE locating pins. And this is the handle that I've used instead when I didn't have a cage, which is a cold shoe mount over here. So the monitor mount still attaches to this handle perfectly fine, using the exact same threads and RE locating pins up here. And on the bottom here, I used to use a quick release plate like this that works with Arca Swiss mounts, so it goes onto my tripod, my gimbal, and also this V-mount battery plate here. So back then, to build my handheld rig, I would just put this onto the cold shoe mount over here, flip this around like this. This V-mount battery goes in the exact same way. And then the monitor goes onto here. Or if I wanted to use a boom mic, the Rode mic instead would go onto one of these cold shoe mounts on the handle over here. And then the monitor would have to go onto the top here like this, so it doesn't interfere with the mic. We'll just go ahead and plug everything in. And that's it. So this is a pretty heavy rig. And as you can see here, it still works perfectly fine without a cage. But there are two issues that I have with this. The first issue is that if I put this down here, you can see there's quite a bit of weight that relies onto this one contact point over here to my camera. And that is my camera's hot shoe mount. So my monitor, my top handle, and my mic is all mounted to my hot shoe mount of the R5C. Now the weight up here doesn't matter too much because when I'm holding the top handle, I'll also be supporting the weight up here through the top handle. But now just the hot shoe mount of my camera is supporting the weight of my lens, my camera body, and this entire V-mount battery. So while I can lift it up like this, it's perfectly fine. When I hold the rig by just the top handle and that supports the weight of the entire camera, I find that it puts a lot of stress on the camera hot shoe for unnecessary reasons, and the hot shoes on the Canon R5s aren't known to be the strongest. There's been a lot of reports of people saying that their hot shoe gets loose on the Canon R5, whether they're using it for just photography, just with the flash, and that had me really worried because I have quite a lot more gear on my R5. Now, I don't know if it's the same for the R5 versus the R5C that I have here, but I'd rather not risk it and find out the hard way. The other big issue that I have with these hot shoe mounted top handles is that they like to move a lot. So I'm not sure if you can see on the camera here, but if I don't move the camera, I can turn this whole handle a little bit, even when it's fully secure on the hot shoe. And that's just because of the way that it's designed. The top handle basically clamps onto the hot shoe of the camera, and no matter how hard you clamp it, you'll find that there's always going to be a little bit of play over here when you mount your handle onto it. And that's especially the case if you have accessories like I do on this. The second thing that I have an issue with is this cable right here. So this is the micro HDMI cable, and as you can see, the head is really tiny. So when you put this on the camera, and when you're moving around filming, if something hits this or if you hit this, there's a really high chance that this would break either the cable or the port inside your camera if you do it a bunch of times. Now, without a cage, there's not a lot of options on how you can secure that piece from breaking on your camera, but certain cages have this protective piece over here that mounts onto the cage that's specifically designed to protect these cables and the ports of your camera from breaking. And without a cage, it's just impossible to mount one of these pieces onto your camera to protect that. Now that we have a better understanding of cages and its functions, the question is, do you need a cage? If you're strictly a photographer who does not shoot video on a regular basis, I'm gonna say you probably do not need a cage. I've done commercial photography for a little bit over a decade now, and the only thing I've ever mounted on my camera during that time was a flash or a small constant light, both of which can just be mounted onto your hot shoe anyways without needing a cage. The only thing that a cage can provide to you as a photographer is protection, but ideally you should be securing your camera to yourself with a wrist strap like this or a neck strap, and a cage won't really save your shutter if you drop your camera often. If you're a videographer or filmmaker, the questions you should be asking yourself is, what accessories do you need to use? And do those accessories require the extra mounting points provided by a cage? Are you okay with adding some bulk to your camera body? And would it fit your bag or carry case with a cage on it? If you have a micro HDMI cable like I do on the R5C, do you use a monitor with your camera? If you said yes to any of those questions, it might be a good idea to go get a cage. If you're a hybrid shooter like I am, who shoots both photos and video on a regular basis, I highly recommend you getting a half cage for your camera if you were to get a cage. I personally think it's the best balance between having enough rigidity for your accessories while not adding too much bulk to your camera, but mostly because the ergonomics of your camera when you're taking photos stays more or less the same. While the cage acts as a foundation for your rig, you still need to buy accessories to rig up your camera after you've purchased the cage. If you want to see a detailed breakdown of how I built my handheld rig, you can check out my video on that linked at the end of this one. If you have any questions about anything in this video, please let me know in the comments below and I'll do my best to answer them. Thanks for watching.